So we are, I don't know if this was in the packet because Jim called me a couple days ago to request that we add this in, which is just a presentation on heavy traffic. So Pam is the National Field Director for the Coalition Against Bigger Trucks. So if you want to come join us.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Sure, thanks. I have some handouts if that's appropriate. Okay, great. Can you start those around here? Sure. Thank you. How much time are you going to give me? I have a short PowerPoint. It takes me 10 minutes. I talk fast.
10 minutes is great.
Okay, excellent.
Keeping it short, we'll give you a cupcake.
Sounds like a deal to me.
Or 5.
Oh, okay, I'll go for the 5. Okay, stay in the right spot. There we go. Oh my goodness, my grandchildren are going to be thrilled when I get home.
Do you want one?
Thank you, sir. I think you just cupcakes like that.
Oh, thank you so much for passing those around.
I have to do this the week.
Okay, everybody ready? I want my cupcakes. Okay, so we are in fact the Coalition Against Bigger Trucks. And thank you for introducing me. I'm the National Field Director. You have some handouts in your package here that we'll refer to as we go along.
Can you see her?
Come on. Thank you. So the Coalition Against Bigger Trucks is actually a national not-for-profit. We are in fact a national coalition, and the first piece of paper in your packet lists all of our national partners. And so you can see it's every national law enforcement association known to man, every local elected officials association known to man, AAA, some railroad associations, some trucking groups, folks who have an interest in safety and infrastructure. We currently are working in 40 states, and the way we work is by members of Congress. So you have a brand new member of Congress, Representative Delgado, and Representative Delgado was appointed to the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, which has purview over heavier and longer trucks in Congress. We are funded by both the railroad industry and the trucking industry. It never seems to surprise anybody when I say railroad industry, but it does surprise folks when I say trucking industry. And the point of fact is that we actually work directly with the trucking industry, the vast majority of which is opposed to heavier and longer trucks. And we'll get into that in a sec. So these are the, can you see that? I'm so sorry. These are the configurations we're talking about. This is the ubiquitous 53-foot single trailer. We see them everywhere, right? They currently are mandated by the federal regulations to run at a max of 80,000 pounds. And the feds regulate weight on the interstate. So what they say goes on interstates in general is what states also accept as their max weight. Every state DOT, though, has the ability to issue permits. In my neck of the woods up in Amsterdam in the foothills of the Adirondacks, there's a bunch of logging permits. Because sometimes the logging industry, in order to keep those jobs in place, need to run a heavier or a longer truck. But they're permitted by New York State DOT. That means there's a limited number of permits. There's also often a small fee attached. So it's a totally different picture than the federal government saying, yeah, you're going to have heavier trucks everywhere. And as I said, they have purview over the interstates, but the thing is, and this is historically proven true over and over again, once the feds raise weight on the interstates, the states are almost forced to sort of follow in line, as you would imagine, because trucks have to leave the interstate to pick up and deliver. So it becomes a matter of interstate commerce as well. This is what's called the longer double. Without the red part, those are twin 28s or double 28s because each cab is 28, or a trailer is 28 feet long. That currently is a mandate from the federal government. And we don't see much of those because the industry folks that I work with tell me, you move from here to here without that red part, you're not getting much of an advantage for the economic input that you're doing by changing out your fleets, right, and putting them in new kinds of configurations. But But if the double 33s are a mandate, then you will see a wholesale changeover from single trailer to double trailer trucks. Why is that important? Because of all the configurations that US DOT studied, including the triples, they did more pavement damage than any other configuration. They also found in their 2000 study, and again that's US DOT, that anytime you move from a single to a double or multi-trailer configuration, your fatal accident rate goes up 11%. Triples, there's a big push for those. They're mostly, thank goodness, in the western states right now, but there's a lot of talk about having them come east of the Mississippi. You know, topography kind of drives what's safe on roads. And triples, longer doubles, heavier trucks, they just don't work here in New York. We've got black ice, we have curvy roads, our bridges are old, our roads are old. This is just not a good situation for these kinds of federal mandates. Safe trucking is vital to our economy, and I said earlier, you know, we're not against the trucking industry. I want to go to Target and find my shampoo on the shelf, right? I know a truck gets it there. And so, but the bottom line here is that enough is enough. Big enough is big enough. And as they get longer, as they get heavier, they do so much more infrastructure damage. They cause so many more safety concerns that it really does become problematic. So you might say, who wants bigger trucks? Literally a handful of the biggest shipping companies in the country. On the longer side, you've got folks like you would guess, right? FedEx, UPS, Amazon. Why? They want to put more in those trailers behind that single driver. Like all of us, like the city, one of the big drivers of cost is salaries. So the trucking companies want to save money, put more behind a single driver, and then for the heavier folks, it's Anheuser-Busch. I always say, you know, don't pick on beer, but International Forest and Paper, people that move really heavy things. And again, they want to put more product behind a single driver. Who opposes bigger trucks? You've got your full list. I wanted to point out, though, the Truckload Carriers Association, they're kind of like an umbrella over all the industry in the U.S. Their members represent fully 92% of the industry. So when I tell you it's just a handful of people pushing for these, those ones I just named, I'm not kidding you. OIDA is the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. That's the medium, small, and I own my own rig guys. So those are the local trucking companies, you know, maybe up to, if they have 10 rigs, 20 rigs, or one, right in that, totally opposed. And do I have a Teamsters logo on there? I don't know. Anyway, the Teamsters are opposed to them, men and women who drive the trucks as well. National Association of County Engineers, American Public Works Association. You know, I was in a member of Congress's office and I handed him this list and he said, huh, and he read through it and he grinned at me and said, politics does indeed make strange bedfellows. I said, yes, sir, it does. That's quite an interesting list of people all opposed to heavier trucks. I just met with some of the sheriffs here in this congressional district, and I should say that the New York State Sheriff's Association has been opposed to heavier and longer trucks for about 10 years now, and remains adamantly opposed, as does the New York State Association of Towns and Townships. They're two of our statewide partners. I referenced the US DOT final report. You will see, you know, I wanted to assure you I really don't make this stuff up at night. You will see everything we say cited in these white papers, and a lot of what you will see comes from US DOT. We don't need to get into all these details because I'm trying to win a cupcake, but in their cover letter to Congress, this was in April of 16, they recommended no changes in the current weight or length of trucks. Why? Because of infrastructure damage and safety concerns. I mean, we can't even get an infrastructure bill passed at the federal level. This was another thing that I found interesting when you talk about safety concerns. As you go above 80,000 pounds, just your braking out of service violations goes up by 18% on the heavier trucks. The longer doubles, even worse. Fully half of those should not be on the road because of out-of-service violation concerns that US DOT found. You know, it's simple physics. The longer a truck gets, the heavier a truck gets, the quicker the safety equipment, brakes, tires, steering go out of spec. And that led into an interesting study by the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. And what they basically said was, any big truck that has an out-of-service violation is 3.5 times more likely to be involved in an accident. Well, that makes sense, right? If the brakes aren't working right. New York budget numbers, you have this in a handout. Now, I mentioned earlier, I don't usually work my own state, okay? And that's because back in 12, when we defeated longer and heavier trucks in the House and in the Senate, and in 15, when we kept the language off the appropriations bill, Senator Schumer and Gillibrand both were very much involved in pushing back on this legislation. But here are some numbers that I found interesting. The second dot in particular, we are on an upward trend in big truck crashes here in New York, and frankly, the nation is either stagnant or slightly trending down. So this is one of those trends you don't want to be above the curve on, right? And so we are up nearly 12% in the last year, and we have been up 47% between 2014 and 2017. That is not a good trend. And I think some of that's driven by our infrastructure, which continues to erode because infrastructure itself is a safety concern for drivers, as you're well aware, and also because our congestion keeps on going up. This is a new one on me too, the third dot. We are currently 8th worst in the country in terms of our bridges. I've never seen us break into the top 10 before. That made me very sad when I pulled that stat last week. You know, New York generally was doing pretty good with infrastructure, but our bridges are aging. The majority of them are over 50 years of age. You can look at the thruway. Thruways eroding. And then, of course, we all know about our local roads. I don't need to go into that for you. Oh, here's my video, just for fun. And I'm not giving up my cupcake, here's the video. Yeah. Okay, so we talk about operational characteristics that make bigger, heavier, longer trucks more dangerous. This is called sway. And what happens is, this will happen with a single trailer, but it's really exacerbated when you get to 2 or 3. The last trailer does like this, and you guys will love this because this is what happens in downtown, your town. This is called off-tracking. So what happens is, the tractor part goes fine around the corner. The first trailer goes over the curb, and the second trailer goes even further and knocks down the signage. So operational characteristics, other things in New York, splash and spray. Longer, heavier, more of that momentary blindness that you can get in a driving rainstorm. And I won't even get started on black ice. All right. Ta-da!
Thank you.
So, questions, comments?
Does anybody have any questions?
Were you coming here?
Oh, good man. I was going to say, what do you want from us, Pam?
We're not actually going to take any action on this because
Right.
it wasn't but tonight.
Okay.
But
Right.
just wanted to make that clear.
Sure, no problem. Generally what we ask, there are a variety of ways you can communicate with your federal delegation. A resolution, if that's something that the committee or the city is interested in. A letter, we provide resolutions, we provide template letters. You can send an email. Again, we can provide a template. We also have a local officials joint letter. If you ever get a chance to go on our website, I've got, I think, about 1,200 local officials from probably 40 plus states around the nation who have signed off on that letter and said we don't need them bigger. So that's another option if you wanted to take some action individually. And then finally, I am setting up a call with the congressman just to say, hey, you know, this is an issue of concern, and any of you would certainly be invited to participate on that, and I'd like to let you know when the day and the time for that.
And I'll reach out to Jim. He couldn't be here. He
Yes,
apologized.
he
but,
told me, yeah.
To see how he wants to, if he wants. to
Okay,
move
great.
forward.
And if you'd like me to come back and talk a little slower, or do this for another group, please let me know. You know, I'm only an hour and a half north, so no biggie. Okay, all right.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all so much. I appreciate the time. I totally need a cupcake. I have to drive home, and I'm going to,
Take as many as you need.
no, well, it'll be fine, thank you.